This tutorial is for how I made my scrap rolls that were in my latest journal collection. This is essentially my version of a snippet roll, which is usually done with fabric. I thought that using paper scraps to create a roll is a great way to use them up and to turn them into something more appealing and usable. So all you have to do is take a pile of scrap papers, and you can be selective about the patterns you use and make them all match together, or you can have them be more mismatched. I think both ways give a really great result. An easy way to match them is just to team similar colours together or similar styles, and you can make your rolls any size that you like. So I made mine pretty long at about 2 meters each. You can also make them as wide as you like. I made mine about 3 inches, I think. In this tutorial I'll be making a shorter version of the roll, so not 2 meters long. So once you choose the size that you want, you just need to cut down your papers into all the same width. So I like to keep the lengths of the papers varying, so some I only had a really small piece of and they ended up being shorter, and some of them were a bit longer. I think the variety makes the roll more interesting. But once you cut up a bunch of pieces, you just start attaching them together. So I knew I would be using a sewing machine, so I just used a glue stick to give them enough hold until I passed it through. But if you don't have a sewing machine, you may want to use a stronger glue and spend more time and more care attaching each piece together. When I made my really long rolls, I also used the edge of my desk as a guide to keep the roll as straight and aligned as I could. And I also used my desk to measure the rolls because my desk is exactly 2 meters long. So when I made the rolls for the collection, I just made them go across the entire length of my desk. If you do plan on sewing, one tip I have is to work in at least 2 sections. So that way you don't have to handle a huge length of paper, and it's easier to maneuver it through your sewing machine. And then at the end you can just attach each section together to make it a super long piece. I also took some rolls of washi tape and added small strips at random across the roll, so this just helps to add a repetitive pattern throughout the length and it blends everything together. You could also add anything else you like to the rolls, like tiny word stickers or other stickers, fabric, labels, buttons, anything that you can think of. And once you're happy with how your roll looks, you can sew it if you want to do that. I sewed a zigzag stitch over every single seam across the roll, and that just made everything really secure and it looks pretty, and it also adds a nice texture as well. Once your roll is all put together, the next part is also optional, but I really like the touch that it adds, and that's just to put the roll through an embossing folder. So I just did some sections of the roll, not the whole thing, and I just picked it sort of at random. I usually focused on the sections that had more plain papers, or papers that I felt would be best accentuated by embossing. And again, it just makes the papers blend together a little bit more, it adds a nice texture and it looks more interesting. So that's pretty much it to creating the actual roll. Now it's time to roll it up or find a way to store it. So I took these wooden tubes that I found on Etsy and I used those to wrap my rolls around. But you could also use like little wooden pegs or spools or anything else you have available to you. You also don't necessarily have to roll your paper strip, you could wrap it around some card or something else similar. I then took some sticky wide washi tape to attach the end of the roll to the wooden spool, and then began wrapping it snugly around, trying to keep it as tightly rolled as I could without it being too rough or pulling on it too much. And at the end of the roll I added a second piece of tape, and then to make it super secure and make it look a little bit cuter, I tied some thread around, thread the ends through a button and then tied it off in a bow. And then it's done. So I think these would make super cute little gifts, and they're also just a really handy way to store your scraps and to make them a bit more fun to use and a bit more inspiring to use. This is a really easy project to do, it's just a little bit time consuming. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one.